Picture a single object worth more than every house on your street combined, sitting on a runway on fire. That was Dubai, 2016. A Boeing 777, 13 years old, one of the most traveled jets Emirates owned, reduced to ash in front of the world. 300 people survived. The airplane was a total write-off. Now here is the part nobody tells you. Losing that airplane cost the airline almost nothing. Not because they are rich enough to shrug off a fortune, nobody is, but because long before that jet ever caught fire, it had quietly already been sold. Sold to people who were betting it would burn. When it did, they paid up, took the wreckage, and the airline moved on by lunchtime. To understand how, you have to follow the money out of Dubai to a single street in London. Start with the thing itself, because the number is the whole story. A modern wide-body airliner is the most expensive moving object most companies will ever touch. Even years old, even with the miles this one had on it, you are talking about a machine worth more than a high-rise tower. Wings, engines, avionics, the whole flying city of it. And in Dubai, in seconds, all of it became scrap. Now do the obvious math the way anyone would. A company owns something worth a fortune. That thing is destroyed. So the company is that much poorer. It feels like simple arithmetic. It is wrong. Because when that jet burned, Emirates did not take a crippling hit to its profits. Of every disaster an airline can suffer, losing the actual airplane is one of the cheapest. The most expensive object in the building is, somehow, the least painful thing to lose. Someone else was always going to pay for the metal. In aviation, the moment a plane is wrecked badly enough that fixing it costs more than it is worth, it gets a cold little label, a hull loss. Not a tragedy, a hull loss. The airframe is a write-off. Emirates Flight 521 was a hull loss. It remains, to this day, the only one in the airline's entire history. And here is the tell. When a jet becomes a hull loss, the airline's first serious phone call is not to a grief counselor. It is to a broker. Because every airliner in the sky is flying under a contract that has already answered the question, what happens if this is destroyed? Think about your car. You crash it, and your insurer argues about what it was really worth that day, minus age, minus wear. You feel shortchanged. Airlines do not live in that world. An airline insures a plane for a number agreed in advance, in writing, before anything goes wrong. And that single difference changes everything. Agreed value is exactly what it sounds like. When an airline insures a jet, it and the insurers agree on paper at the very start what that airplane is worth, not its value on the day of the crash. A fixed, signed number. From that moment, the airline is barely exposed to the airframe at all. If the plane is destroyed, the insurers do not get to argue about age or wear. They pay the agreed number, full stop. Minus a deductible, which on a machine this size is a rounding error, the equivalent of a copay on a heart transplant. Feel how strange that is. The airline effectively pre-sold its own airplane years in advance at a guaranteed price, with delivery triggered by catastrophe. The crash is not a loss, it is the sale closing. And there is a cleaner detail still. When the insurer pays out, the insurer keeps the wreck. They wrote a check for a whole airplane, so they own whatever is left of it. So the airline gets paid the full value of the plane. Which raises an uncomfortable question. Was it even the airline's plane to begin with? Here, most people's mental picture falls apart. We assume airlines own their jets, the way you own your car. Many of them do not. Across the world's fleet, roughly half of all airliners are not owned by the airlines flying them. They are leased or rented from a handful of enormous leasing firms. So when one of those jets is destroyed, the check does not even land where you would think. The policy names whoever actually owns the metal, and on a leased aircraft, that is the leasing company, not the airline. They get made whole. The airline walks away from the smoking wreck, owing almost nothing on a plane it never owned. Layer by layer, the people running the airline arrange things so that the most expensive object in the business is the one they can most easily afford to lose. But money does not vanish. Somebody just paid for a destroyed wide body and meant it. So follow it one more step and you leave Dubai entirely. Almost the whole planet's worth of aviation risk runs through one improbably small place, the insurance market clustered in a single square mile of London, anchored by Lloyd's. The first aircraft policy in the world was written there, back in 1911, before most countries even had airlines. A century later, when a jet burns anywhere on Earth, the money very often traces back to here, and the market is tiny for what it does. The number of insurers willing to put their name on a wide body is not in the thousands, it is in the dozens. So how do a few dozen people absorb such a loss without flinching? They do not. The risk is sliced into pieces and spread, insurers, then reinsurers, then the reinsurers of those reinsurers, until that one airframe is scattered across hundreds of balance sheets in dozens of countries. That is the trick. One concentrated catastrophe, a single fireball on a single runway, gets atomized into thousands of tiny survivable scratches spread around the world. No one is ruined because everyone takes a paper cut, which resolves the paradox we started with. The airline barely lost $1 because the dollar was never going to land in one place. But here is the reversal. All that machinery does not make the cost disappear. It makes it move. When a big loss hits, the market hardens. The insurers raise the price of covering everything that flies. Not just the airline that crashed, every airline. And airlines are not charities. A higher cost of insurance is simply another cost of a seat, folded into your ticket, like fuel. So the people who finally invisibly pay for a burned airplane are passengers, millions of them, buying flights they will never connect to a crash they once saw on the news. Because there are two very different things an airline can lose in a crash, and the industry treats them nothing alike. There is the hull, the metal, which we have just watched get neutralized into a routine payout. And there is everything the metal was carrying. Hull cover is the cheap, clean half of the policy. The far larger, far more frightening half is liability, the cover for what happens to the people. A wide body carries hundreds of passengers, and the claims from a mass casualty disaster do not stop at a tidy, agreed number. They can run into the billions across years in many countries at once. And there is a third loss no policy in London can ever pay out: trust. An airline can wire away a destroyed airframe before lunch. It cannot wire away a reputation. The carriers that vanish after disasters almost never die from the cost of the airplane. They die because passengers stop booking. So come back to that runway in Dubai and look again with what you now know: a vast machine burning to you the most expensive thing in the frame. To the people who run the money, the cheapest. The airframe was pre-sold to insurers at an agreed value, very possibly owned by a leasing firm in another country, and the loss was scattered across the planet before the fire was even out. That is what aviation understands, and the rest of us do not. Planes are not assets to be protected. They are risks to be moved, leased so you do not own them, insured so you do not pay for them, reinsured so no single person ever absorbs them. An airline can survive losing the airplane. It planned for that long ago in a building in London. What it cannot survive is losing the one thing it can never put a price on. An airline does not fear the crash that destroys a plane. It fears the crash that destroys a name. And how its accountants quietly price the passengers a human life in the cold arithmetic of a contract that is for the next one.